Let me begin here. We are in the midst of a constitutional crisis started by the Biden administration about the border. Joe Biden is attempting to sell the American people on a bill of goods that is based on a lie that he, the commander-in-chief of the American military, president of the United States, who has sworn to uphold, protect, and defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, is incapable and unable of securing the American border unless Congress passes a law that he wants that will allow the continued flow of illegal immigrants to the tune of 5,000 a day into this country. It is noxious horse manure that the President of the United States is trying to sell to the American public, an abdication of his responsibility as President of the United States, and a betrayal of the compact that the states of this union entered into called the Constitution, where if you believe him, his argument is that the individual sovereign nations that entered into a compact to make a more perfect union together, gave up their ability to defend themselves, and he, the president, is incapable of doing so without some additional appropriation from Congress to give him what he wants. It's a damn lie. And the fact that he would presume the nation of Texas would give up its sovereign rights and enter into union with the United States and then be unable to defend itself is again noxious horse manure. Can you really imagine that you've had the Texas wins its sovereignty from Mexico and looks at an alliance with the United States? Can you imagine the conversation? Hey guys, if we do this, we can't protect ourselves from Mexico. We got to rely on Washington, D.C., 1,000 miles away. We don't have wire and communication to get them quickly, so we're going to have to send a horse messenger up to D.C. if Mexico invades and tell them, y'all come bring federal troops because we're no longer allowed to do it because we entered the Constitution. Really, do you really think that Texas would have joined the United States and given up the right to defend its own border? Of course not. It's ignorant to think so. You are a stupid person if you believe that Texas is not able to defend itself. And guess what? Texas has been defending itself. And contrary to the hysteria in the media that Texas is defying the Supreme Court, actually, the Supreme Court did not tell Texas it could not secure its border. And Texas has been laying razor wire and sending troops. And the 5,000 a day border crossings, the ones that Joe Biden wants to keep, down to about 200 a day. Apparently, Texas is more competent than Washington, D.C., and its wheelchair-bound governor is more with it, capable, able, and has the mental capacity than the dementia-addled old man who walks across the stage aimlessly in Washington, D.C. But it goes beyond that. And again, this gets to the ProPublica story. I'm abhor giving them attention, but this is necessary, and I need to read this passage to you. Years before Andrés Manuel López Obrador was elected as Mexico's leader in 2018, U.S. drug enforcement agents uncovered what they believed was substantial evidence that major cocaine traffickers had funneled some $2 million to his first presidential campaign. According to more than a dozen interviews with U.S. and Mexican officials and government documents reviewed by ProPublica, the money was provided to campaign aides in 2006 in return for a promise that a López Obrador administration would facilitate the traffickers' criminal operations. The investigation did not establish whether López Obrador sanctioned or even knew of the traffickers' reported donations. But officials said the inquiry, which was built on the extensive cooperation of a former campaign operative and a key drug informant, did produce evidence that one of López Obrador's closest aides has agreed to the proposed arrangement. The allegation that representatives of Mexico's future president negotiated with notorious criminals has continued to reverberate among U.S. law enforcement and foreign policy officials who have long been skeptical of López Obrador's commitment to take on drug traffickers. The case raised difficult questions about how far the United States should go to confront the official corruption that has been essential to the emergence of Mexican drug traffickers as a global criminal force. While some officials argue that it is not the United States' job to root out endemic corruption in Mexico, others say that efforts to fight organized crime and build the rule of law will be futile unless officials who protect the traffickers are held to account. In their investigation, DEA agents developed what they considered an extraordinary inside source after they arrested the former campaign operative on drug charges in 2010. To avoid federal prison, the operative gave a detailed account of the trafficker's cash donations, which he said he helped deliver. He surreptitiously recorded conversations with Nicholas Molino Bastar, the close Lopez Obrador aide who the operative said participated in the scheme. Since taking office in December 2018, Lopez Obrador has led a striking retreat in the drug fight. His approach, which he summarized in the campaign slogan, "Hugs, not bullets," is concentrated on social programs to attack the sources of criminality rather than confront the criminals. You want the kicker? Do you want the kicker? Do you want the punchline? The Obama administration knew. The Obama administration knew and chose to do nothing because they didn't want to offend. The Obama administration didn't want to look like it was interfering in a presidential election in Mexico. And so they did nothing when he got elected. So the DEA began documenting this when George Bush was president. It comes to a head when AMLO, that's his nickname, when AMLO is running, when Obama is president. And Obama does nothing because he doesn't want to offend. We have the Mexican president in the pocket of the drug cartels. But wait, there's a completely unrelated story that I believe completely is related, and it is a deeply, deeply disturbing thing because AMLO's ties go to the Sinaloa drug cartel. Now, this is from the Brookings Institute. The global footprint of criminal groups from China has expanded along with China's economic and geopolitical presence around the world. North America's fentanyl crisis thrusts China-linked criminal networks and their expanding international connections, such as the Sinaloa cartel, to U.S. policy forefront. However, the scope of organized crime from China extends far beyond global drug trafficking and money laundering. Internationally, Chinese criminal gangs engage in poaching and wildlife trafficking, cybercrime, and elaborate fraud and scams, also featuring people trafficking and enslavement, long experience in illegally bringing people to the United States and Canada. Criminal networks from China have intensified activities at the U.S.-Mexico border. So weave all of this stuff together because it is all connected. You have the Mexican president in the pocket of the drug cartels in Mexico, who are in the pocket of the Chinese communist mob, which is in the pocket of the president of China. We're in a war in our administration. And by the way, it's the elite of both parties. The Republicans are as absolutely out to lunch on this as the Democrats. We're in a war for our survival as a nation with China and the Mexican drug cartels, with the Mexican president as their operative, and no one's man enough to admit it. What's happening at the southern border is an act of war. Do you know the number one group of people now crossing the border? Chinese men. How many of them are in these Chinese criminal gangs coming across to work with the drug cartels of Mexico? A massive wave of Chinese men coming across the border, Vietnamese men as well, but mostly from China. We have the Mexican president refuses to do anything about it. Mexico is in a state of collapse, by the way. Mexico is actually not a sovereign nation. It is a criminal enterprise at this point. There was a story I meant to talk about the other day. It was an American couple went to a resort on the Baja Peninsula, and they were literally the only people at the resort the entire time. It began to creep them out. There was no one there. Why? Because tourism in the Baja Peninsula has gotten so bad because of all the terroristic activity of the drug cartels. I know someone whose cousin was kidnapped and drugged in Mexico and assaulted, and she was thankfully able to escape and make her way to the airport, where American embassy personnel were able to help her. Literally, she was kidnapped because allegedly she offended the cartel with the way she looked at one of them, and they called her family and ransomed her, and she was thankfully able to escape. It was a wild, weird story. She was drugged and held captive. Mexico is a criminal enterprise. It's not a sovereign nation, and we should begin to treat it as such. It's run by a man who is in the pocket of the drug cartels, which are in turn in the pocket of the communist Chinese, who are pledging to help us with the fentanyl crisis in this country. And you know, and I know, they're not actually going to do it. They make these promises all the time. Our American policy leaders on the left and the right have to wake up to this. And there will be more buy-in from the Republican side than the Democratic side. We share a border with Mexico. It is unsecure because of a dereliction of duty of Democrats working with some Republicans. This ProPublica report should be a massive wake-up call for all of us, that we're so focused on China in Asia, and we're so focused on Iran in the Middle East, and we've probably got Iran, and we know we have China on our southern border working with the Mexican president who is in the pocket of the drug cartels, who wish to expand their criminal enterprises into the United States. It's time for Washington to wake up. We're at war, whether they know it or not. It's not a war we need to fight necessarily with our military across the border, but it sure as heck is a war where we need the American military to secure our southern border and start acting like it instead of the clown show we have in Washington, D.C. right now that wants to offer up a border security deal that would still allow 5,000 people a day to cross the border. Texas has put down razor wire and cut that 5,000 to 200 a day. You would think Washington was capable of doing the same. But it does make you wonder who in Washington, D.C. might also be in the pocket of the drug cartels in China. Because if the Mexican president can be in the pocket of the drug cartels from China, I bet the Americans can as well. Again, from the Brookings Institute, the scope of organized crime from China extends far beyond global drug trafficking and money laundering internationally. Chinese criminal groups engage in poaching and wildlife trafficking, cybercrime, frauds, and scams such as people trafficked and enslaved, bringing people into the United States, and also corruption of government officials. And they are collaborating with the same Mexican cartel that paid millions of dollars to the current president of Mexico. It does not take a rocket scientist to see what is going on. Our national security is in jeopardy. What we are dealing with at our southern border is not an immigration crisis. It is and will remain a national security crisis, and people in Washington sure as hell better start paying attention to it before a lot of Americans get killed beyond the fentanyl crisis.